Hi there, welcome to Scotland at 7 on the 28th of November. I'm Gordon Ross. In the studio with me this evening is our Rural Affairs correspondent, Day Tucker. Welcome back to the studio, Day. Day and I are going to be discussing the topics of the day, and I think since we have we've started a little bit late, so I think we'll just get tore into this, Day.
Yes.
Our first story this evening is about Boris Johnson's spending plans and also Labour's spending plans. It seems that the Institute for Fiscal Studies claims that the Prime Minister's spending blueprint looks too small to ease the strain on stretched public services, raising the prospect of higher taxes or more borrowing down the road. Now, by contrast, the Labour Party's plan to tax and spend more than any previous British government in peacetime was so sizable that it probably could not be delivered in the next 5 years of the Parliament, the non-partisan IFS has said in a report ahead of the December 12th election. They claim that neither is a properly credible prospectus. This seems like a damning indictment of both parties' manifestos.
You could not make it up, could you? There's a golden opportunity for one or the other to make the other look ridiculous, and they've managed to both make each other look ridiculous.
You think
make themselves look ridiculous.
It's almost as if they want to lose the election, isn't
it?
It
is, yes.
It says also here, I'll go through one or two of the details here, that after a decade of cuts to many public services, both Johnson's Conservative Party and Labour are promising voters that austerity is about to end.
Oh, aye.
But can it?
No.
I mean, when Brexit happens, how are we going to pay for all of this? I mean, that's got to be the question.
Well, you've got austerity coming from Brexit for a start. You've got austerity coming from mismanagement. You've got austerity coming from bad policies.
Yeah.
You've got austerity coming from the ongoing costs and the past costs of Brexit itself. Oh. So, I think the public aren't entirely daft.
There is also this problem that no matter what they promised before this general election, the black cloud of Brexit is hanging over it completely. And all of the uncertainty with Brexit means that perhaps none of these things might even be achieved, not a single one of them.
Yes.
Borrowing, according to the report from the IFS, would probably be flat under the Conservatives, but the economic shock of a no-deal Brexit would push up the budget deficit to 4% of its economic output, more than double its present level. So even if the Tories went ahead as they plan to do and don't raise taxes, but also don't cut the taxes, the deficit is going to double. Simply because of the Brexit uncertainties and what might happen if there is not time to conclude a trade deal, which is widely believed now that there isn't time to conclude a trade deal in just a single year. Do you believe that Boris can do a trade deal in a year? I mean, it seems like a huge task for anybody to do a trade deal in such a short time.
I'm not the right person to ask because I don't know hugely about trade deals. However, I do follow Michael Dugan, the Irish economics professor, and various other people who really know what they're talking about in terms of trade deals. And all I've read over the last year or so is that we've been told that it's all pie in the sky.
Well, Labour's election proposals, it's claimed, would lead to higher taxes for more than just the top 5% of earners. The party's claiming it will only be for the top 5%, but according to the IFS, it will involve people earning anything over £80,000. And it says further tax hikes would probably be needed to fund the spending surge. So not only will Labour's tax plans be blown apart by this, they will probably have to raise the taxes even further than they say. And then separately...
But apparently, if you're earning over £80,000, you're in the top 3% of earners in the UK.
Is that true?
Well, according to a discussion that there was after that guy on Question Time, remember the man that said, he was jumping up and down about having to pay tax
because he
paid
going up.
80,000. And then I remember reading something else somewhere else where they said that that was within the top 3%.
Oh, that's interesting. I actually didn't know that. It's hard to know what
Whether
the
it's
various
true or not,
strata
but
of pay are.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that some charity CEOs earn up to £200,000 a year, which sounds absolutely incredible, but apparently it's true.
Oh yes, it is. But when I say it's the top 3%, you know, okay, you've got these people earning mega bucks and the
Millions
charities
in some
and
cases.
what have you, but there's the majority of people are earning hee-haw. So
Yeah.
the percentage is
Well, the thing is,
sort
there's
of
no
levelled
middle
out.
ground. You're either very,
No.
very low paid and there's a lot of you, or
Exactly.
you're very, very highly paid and there's hardly any of
Yes.
you. And then the average of that is actually somewhere in between where there aren't any earnings
Yes.
almost.
Yes.
So there's no middle ground really
No.
to speak
No.
of. I was going to say separately, on Thursday, another think tank called the Resolution Foundation said that the rival spending promises meant that both parties were likely to break their own fiscal rules in order to provide this spree, this
Yes.
this wonderful utopian
Yes.
dream that they're promising everyone. They've claimed, I'm going to quote what the Resolution Foundation has said, taking huge risks with the brand new fiscal rules that are supposed to bind the next government for its whole time in office, risks seriously undermining the UK's economic credibility at a time when it's already under strain. And this according to the Resolution Foundation Research Director, James Smith.
Yes.
So basically it seems that they're saying that if they go ahead with these plans, that the whole of the United Kingdom's credibility as a nation, presumably, and its creditworthiness.
Well,
would
our
be hurt.
creditworthiness now, is it down to one
Was
star?
It
or
used to be AAA plus,
Triple
and
and
then it was 2A's.
two,
I don't know what it
and
is
we're
now.
down to one now, I think.
It's going to go down in battery sizes,
Yes.
isn't it? AAA
0,
B.
minus.
Who knows? Anyway, so it seems that both Labour and Conservative spending plans are unrealistic.
Yes.
Anyway, we'll move on to our next story this evening, and that is that net migration to the UK has fallen to the lowest level in almost 6 years, according to the Office for National Statistics. Are we surprised?
No, not in the slightest.
The hostile environment appears to be doing what it was intended to do.
And of course, don't forget, that didn't just happen with Brexit. That hostile environment was introduced by Theresa May when she was Home Secretary.
Well before the Brexit
Yes, so
referendum.
it's been rumbling along there quite happily all that time, where voters haven't really been aware of it.
Was it not Theresa May who put the Go Home adverts
Absolutely.
on vans as well in 2015, I believe? I want to fact check that, but I seem to remember that.
You're right, that was she.
According to the Office for National Statistics, they've said that 212 more people moved to Britain than left, the lowest total since the year to September 2013. So they've had a net migration of 212,000 people. The immigration of EU citizens has fallen to 199,000. That's the lowest level since the year ending 2013. So everything seems to be going back to 2013 levels.
So but there are more than one reason for them leaving. They'll be leaving because of the hostile environment, but they're also leaving because of the fall in the pound. So it isn't as economically viable to come here to earn money to take back home.
Well, I remember we had a discussion some weeks ago in the studio about this exact subject, and you were telling us that most of the migrants who come here to work on farms and to pick fruit and to help with animal husbandry do so because the pound is worth a lot more than their own currency.
Yes.
And presumably if the pound has fallen,
yes,
that makes the whole thing less economically viable for them.
Yes.
Less point in doing it if they're going to earn half as much.
Yes.
How
One
much?
point, I went to the post office the other day to get a euro, or to exchange for euros, and I got back, I can't remember exactly, but it was £1, one something.
I think it was 112 or something like that.
But it says that, but you've got to spend £1,000 to get that.
Oh, of
if
course,
you're only saying I want 100 euros, you'll only get this £1 to €1 point something
almost
or other.
parity now when
Almost
it comes
parity.
to changing money
It's
for
been
holidays.
like that for quite a while, although it goes up and down a little, it doesn't go up and down much. And you've got to have big bucks to make it worthwhile.
I'm tempted to suggest to the Tories that they actually go and start using the euro instead, who's reached parity, albeit accidentally. Now, immigration, as we both know, was a hot topic ahead of ahead of the Brexit vote, apparently, and also it's a hot topic ahead of this general election. The Prime Minister has pledged to limit the number of people coming to Britain by implementing this so-called Australian-style point system. I don't know about you, I have some friends in Australia, and they seem to think that this system in Australia is not very good and is pretty unfair by all accounts. But this is what the Conservatives apparently want to have. Now,
they let my husband and myself in, I have to say, in the 1970s.
In Australia?
Yes, we were allowed in on the £10 package.
Oh, a great £10 adventure when you were encouraged.
When we got married, it was at the time of the great strike here, and the dustbins and the bodies piling up in the streets and the bin bags and things.
Oh, I remember.
And we thought, it's going to pot, let's get out of here. So off we shot to Australia once we were accepted as being able to contribute to Australia.
Yep.
You know, they looked at us and they got a good bargain because we worked all the time we were there. And that was £10 passage for each of us. But I think we were about the last group.
And did the Australian government at that time not help with things like resettlement and finding a home or employment?
Yeah, they did. You could go, they would put you into not a camp, but, you know, you got somewhere to live.
Yeah, there would be some temporary accommodation.
Temporary accommodation, yes. We were lucky because we had jobs to go to, so, you know, our employers
looked after us. Talking about that reminds me of my own parents were planning to do that back in the early 60s, and they decided against it at the last minute.
Yeah, well,
they told me that a while ago.
It was a great scheme, and because we were both professionals, we made money there that we could not have made here.
Sounds like the kind of scheme we should really set up in Scotland for farm workers.
Absolutely.
To bring them over.
Yes.
Anyway, what I was going to say next here is that Boris Johnson has pledged to limit the numbers, as we know, and he said that while there are still more EU citizens moving to the UK than leaving, EU net migration has fallen since 2016, driven by fewer EU arrivals for work. And some of these comments, are coming from the Office for National Statistics. Now, in contrast, non-EU net migration has gradually increased for the past 6 years, largely as more non-EU citizens have come to study. So the vacuum left by Europeans leaving is being filled by other migrants coming in from other places.
Yes.
Kind of begin to think that the system isn't really doing what it's supposed to do at all. It's actually just deterring people from Europe only.
Yes. Which is exactly what it is.
Exactly. It's a very much discriminatory policy.
Yes.
Boris Johnson has said that Britain will leave the EU by the end of January if his ruling Conservatives win a parliamentary majority in the election. Now, responding to the news, the SNP has warned that any form of Brexit being promoted by both the Tories and Labour will be devastating for Scotland and hitting businesses and frontline services. And last week, the SNP echoed the concerns raised by the Confederation of British Industry. Now, this is an interesting one because the Confederation of British Industry are not known to be in any way supportive of the SNP, but in this case, they agree with one another. And they have said, or they have warned, that Labour's immigration policies could crack the foundations of the economy, whilst the Tories' hostile environment would lead to a skills shortage, leaving a gap in the workers needed for key sectors.
Now, how come one is cracking the foundations and the other is leading to it?
I think there's perhaps a little political bias in there from the CBI.
Yes,
but
both are bad.
They're both bad, but they specifically criticised Boris's plan because of the skills shortage that it will cause. Yeah. And we know, or you know particularly as a rural farmer, that you can't get by without the seasonal help.
No.
And
that is on top of the tardiness of governments throughout the UK to invest in apprenticeships for far too long.
In other words, to educate young people who
Yes.
want to come into the
Yes.
rural industries of farming. And
Well, not just our rural industries, but if you remember during the Blair years,
Yeah.
when Tony Blair wanted everybody to go to university.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I think, to be fair, he said they should all have the opportunity. Well,
Yeah.
they do all have the opportunity. Whether they take it or not is a different matter. But the message that came through to parents was, my child's brilliant, they must go to university.
Yeah.
So going to university was the aim, and doing an apprenticeship was seen as somehow vocational, was just
below
down
that.
there.
Yes, that kind of, what would you call it, workplace snobbery has
Yes.
existed in the UK for a very long time.
Yes.
Engineers typically were frowned upon by
Absolutely.
the upper echelons of society
Yes.
as well, even though they were the ones who were creating the wealth and designing the equipment for
Yes.
making money. To carry on with this theme and to explore a little bit more about what the SNP has said, Stuart MacDonald, who is the SNP's immigration spokesperson, and I think he's candidate for Cumbernauld, Kilsyth and Kirkintilloch.
Yes.
He says that with both the Tories and Labour pledging to push ahead with inflicting lasting harm with their damaging Brexit plans, it's clear that only a vote for the SNP is a vote to escape Brexit, protect the economy and public services, and to put Scotland's future in Scotland's hands. Now, it's a theme I know that the SNP like to repeat, but putting the power in Scotland's people's hands. Do you think, or what do you think the advantages will be of independence over Brexit? Can you see some clear advantages there?
Well, apart from the obvious that you've just
it's
stated.
interesting to explore them
Yes.
sometimes.
We will be able to control how we manage our economy, and we will be able to control how we care for, nurture and look after our people so that they become really productive, happy citizens.
So generally, you think in terms of the social cohesion of Scotland, it's going to be a huge...
Socio-economic.
Yeah.
That for me encompasses, if we've got control over delivering positive socio-economic policies.
How do you think that the independent version of Scotland will deal or should deal with immigration? What should we be doing?
We should be, again, you look for people who are going to contribute and want to contribute to your society, and it should be controlled by us for the needs that we have in our country, which is probably no different from what is wanted down south as well.
I wonder, I mean, thinking aloud about this, I often wonder what the new Scotland would be like, but one of the things that struck me as a possibility is actually, instead of doing a trade deal with some European countries, we do an employment deal with some countries, and we say, well, we need a lot of farm workers.
Yeah.
What do you need? And have agreements that people can move back and forth between the countries on a regular basis. These are the kind of deals I thought that Scotland ought to be making.
And that's really imaginative freedom of movement, isn't it? Very creative freedom of movement, which is, I suppose, what they envisaged when they created that phrase.
Well, that is what the European Union espouses, is the whole idea of Schengen, was that so that people could move from one country to another without boundaries and without needing to show
and exchange expertise and skills and what have you. Now,
I'm just going to kind of leave this subject in a moment, but it says here, I was talking about the rest of what Stuart MacDonald has said, and he said that freedom of movement and immigration have brought huge benefits to Scotland's economy, and it helps to mitigate the demographic challenge facing the country. Now, what do you think he means by the demographic challenge?
Well, think about, can you visualise the map of Scotland and the vast emptiness that there is, and you've got pockets of busy ports like, say, Peterhead or up in Shetland.
You have little clusters of activity.
Now, can they support the number of people required, for instance, to man their fleet, their fishing fleet, deckhands?
Without having to recruit from around the world.
You don't need a deckhand to go to university or even college necessarily.
No, they just need to know how to
They need to be trained how to do it and have perhaps, some college skills, but basically it's a practical skill.
Do you think we would also be more free to develop our own in-house, as you say, education and training, so that we can specifically fill some of these skills gaps ourselves? That way we may not need to invite too many other people over from other countries to do the work.
Well,
Okay.
Harping back to my days when we were doing the rural skills course, it was flexible enough that in my area we trained the youngsters to do horticulture and agricultural skills and things like that. But on the West Coast, some of the schools did skills in boat building.
Yeah, something I'm interested in, that actually.
Aha, well, you got that. There's something in Govan, isn't there, that's really good?
Yes, there is. This thing called Gale over in Govan.
But the course was so flexible that, I mean, you had gamekeepers in Fife being trained because there was a shortage of gamekeepers in the sort of Fife
this is what fascinates
border.
me about your vantage point from outside of the metropolis of the Central Belt. Gives people an idea of what actually goes on out in rural parts of Scotland, which we just don't see here enough.
No.
And it doesn't seem to form part of the future planning of the country very often. Anyway, I would like to leave this for the moment, but just to say in closing that according to the SNP, the ONS figures reveal that even before we've left the EU, the impact's already being felt, with more EU citizens being put off from coming to the UK. So despite the fact that we haven't even left yet, these European workers are already thinking it's not worth it.
Well, why would you go when you know the whole message that's coming out of the UK at the moment is one of we don't want you, stay away.
Yeah. Now, interestingly, the next subject actually is almost entirely nothing to do with the first one. A new poll has shown that only the SNP can beat the Tories in Scotland. Polls out today, in fact, the Ipsos Mori poll for STV News has found that 44% of Scots plan to vote SNP, with the Tories in second place on a rather weak 26%. So the SNP's vote stands at not quite twice that of the Tory party, but it's pretty close. Why is that? Where are the other parties in this? We seem to have become a binary.
Well, they've disgraced themselves. I mean,
we
we all know what
Labour,
you know, they deserve to be at the bottom of the pile. The Liberal Democrats, you know, wee Willie Rennie. I mean,
you feel sorry for Willie sometimes.
You know, I remember seeing him at the Border Union show one year, walking down one of the main avenues, all on his own. And
Poor soul.
I just felt
did
so
you go
sorry.
and talk to him?
I didn't. No, I didn't. I should have done, but I just thought, there you are. You're the leader of the Liberal Democrats. And I can remember when I was a director, maybe I shouldn't say this, Scottish Land and Estates.
You've started
and
now. You can't
at
not
one
tell
point,
us.
you know, we used to go to all the conferences, and but of course it costs to go to conferences.
Of course, yeah.
And there was a discussion came up about the Liberal Democrat conference, and we all said, it's not worth it. You know,
you're not going
there's
to go
no point
to
in
it.
going there. I think they do now.
Yes. Well, I mean,
Well,
the
I
Liberal
don't know.
Democrats,
I don't know.
to be fair to them, they have, 3 seats in the Highlands and Islands.
Yes.
So somebody loves them up there.
Well, yes, they do. They're very traditional up there. And to be fair, they have had good MPs in the past and MSPs in the past.
I always find it baffling why they supported Alistair Carmichael up in Shetland and Orkney.
After what he did.
After what he admitted to doing, I thought it was incredible.
Yes.
Anyway, sorry, to come back to the poll before we go completely off topic. This poll has also found that support for independence stands at, guess what, 50%.
Oh, aye.
Funny how it never rises above that in any British poll, isn't it?
Yeah. But do you have any faith in polls?
None whatsoever.
No. I mean, aren't they designed to control people's thinking?
Yeah, they're designed to manipulate the way you vote.
Yes.
Ian Blackford, the SNP leader in Westminster, has commented on this Ipsos Mori poll, and he said it's increasingly clear that this election is a 2-horse race in Scotland. one of them's a thoroughbred and the other one's a Shetland pony, I think. Only the SNP can beat the Tories and deprive Boris Johnson of the majority he craves. With the support of independence, with the support for independence now at 50%, it's completely unsustainable for any Westminster politician to try and block Scotland's right to choose. The SNP will be working every day between now and the election to keep Boris Johnson out of Downing Street. Voters have a choice. If they want to escape Brexit and end austerity, they need to vote for the SNP. And I honestly can't really find any holes in that argument in terms of the reality of what's going on at the moment. At a personal level, others may disagree, of course.
Well, interestingly, there are some people who are conflicted about it because they have relatives down south. You know, they're perhaps English themselves. They're worried about Boris getting in.
Right.
And they haven't been told how important it is up here and that we would have the balance of power in Westminster. But they still think that, you know, maybe that they shouldn't be voting for the SNP. Because it will take votes away from the Tories up here. So you're talking about people who have relatives in England worried that if they vote SNP... If they vote SNP, then it might take away one of the Tory seats.
And that would affect their relatives.
That would affect the number of Tory seats down in Westminster. And
that would be bad because the
I
Labour
guess,
Party might end up in a hung parliament
yes,
with the Tories again.
Yes,
and therefore
there's
you'd have another stalemate.
Yes.
I can understand that.
They don't want either, really. But
it's a Hobson's choice.
They're conflicted, as I said. Yeah. And it's
I don't know
somehow
about you,
we've got to get the message through to them that, look, if you vote for the SNP, forget the Tories, forget that they might add one or two more seats. There's far more SNP seats up here, and we will be fighting to do the right thing and try and get Brexit shoved off the table.
Well, I hope so. But anyway, let's move on, Dave. The next story this evening is a statement from the SNP, and they're saying that they're calling on the UK government to get a grip of eye-watering delivery fees. Now, the figures published ahead of Black Friday, which I hate. I don't know about you, Dave, that Black Friday is just, to me, just
it's an American
another
thing,
American
isn't it?
import that I personally don't understand. But anyway, according to the figures published ahead of Black Friday, these have laid bare the annual cost of rip-off delivery charges for shoppers across rural Scotland. Again, I think something which you probably have strong opinions on, the fact that it costs you more if you happen to live somewhere in the Highlands than it does to buy something online and have it delivered in the Central Belt. Yeah. Shoppers from the Scottish Parliament Information Centre found that consumers in Inverness and Nairn were the worst hit, footing a £7.2 million bill this year alone in additional delivery charge, not the whole thing. £7.2 million. A full regional breakdown of annual delivery surcharges across rural Scotland is attached. Now it's here. I can quote one or two things to you to see if you're surprised about them. So in Inverness and Nairn, we know that the annual cost to the adult population of delivery charges is 7.2 million. In Skye, Lochaber and Badenoch, it's 6.2 million. In Argyll and Bute, 3.1 million. Caithness and Sutherland, 4.8 million, and it goes on and on. There isn't a single part of rural Highland Scotland or the islands which has less than £1 million of additional surcharges to pay when they order online. Yeah. It's an incredible almost discrimination against people who happen to live a little bit further away from the distribution centre.
It is.
It makes you wish that the postal service hadn't been privatised. And we had a nice level playing field where everybody paid the same amount of money for the same thing.
Well, I think that's one of the things that the SNP were going to tackle. And was this not Richard Lochhead's baby? He took up the cause for this and has been fighting it for some years now, and has raised the profile of the unfair delivery charges. But I wonder, could this be an opportunity for some company, or are they just making hay while they can?
Well, I've got the comments here from Richard Lochhead himself. He said it's time for the next UK government to do more to end this practice and get a grip of the sky-high surcharges. Westminster has the powers, it says here, to put an end to rip-off parcel delivery surcharges for Scots. But for too long now, successive UK governments have sat on their hands and done nothing. Because it doesn't matter to them or their voters, does it?
No, not at all.
Alongside my colleagues in Westminster, I have led the campaign and repeatedly raised this issue with the UK ministers, but they've refused to listen. While delivery surcharges continue to hit the pockets of families across Scotland. It's time for the next government to take some real concrete action and get a grip of these surcharges. But what's the chances of it happening? They've not shown any interest in it before now. It is another big problem, but Scotland itself, if it's independent, will have its own regional distribution
networks. We'll be able to be creative about how we can bring fairness into the delivery system.
We might even be able to bring back some or all of the postal service back into public ownership, perhaps.
Or something like that.
It certainly would be nice. OK, let's move along quickly now to the next story.
I mean, the Highlands and the Islands are very good in that they share parcels and post with other deliveries of things.
They sort of put them in together with other things.
If there's a cattle truck going from Oban across to some island, there'll be stuff in with it, yes.
I guess you have to be sort of expedient way of doing things when you're living out away from everything. Now, to moving this story abroad now, this is a story concerning Malta. And the Maltese Prime Minister's aide has been accused of being the mastermind of the Caruana Galizia killing. Now, for those of you who don't know what this is about, there was a journalist, an investigative journalist in Malta named Daphne Caruana Galizia, and she uncovered a web of extreme corruption at all levels of the Maltese government and blew the lid on it. So she basically opened a can of worms. And apparently it seems that those in charge of Malta didn't like this. And Miss Galizia was in fact murdered by a car bomb when she was on her way. I can't remember whether she was going to work or from work. I think it was from work. Anyway, the allegations are being made against a man called Keith Shembry. And they've been made by prominent businessman Jorgen Finnick, who was arrested last week and is understood to be seeking legal immunity in return for his testimony. So this man is going to grass up all of the top men in or I'm assuming it's mostly men, in the Maltese government who seem to have apparently bankrolled the murder of this young woman. The businessman has been attempting to implicate Shembry, a close friend of the Prime Minister, Joseph Muscat, in his statements to the police. Shembry, who was arrested in connection with the murder on Tuesday morning and is now in police bail, has previously denied having any connection to the murder of Caruana Galizia, who was killed 2 years ago. His lawyers didn't respond to a request for comment. Now, the police have cautioned that they're still corroborating Finnick's claims and that not all of them have been reliable, according to reports in the local media. Last week, we had a guest presenter on who had just come back from Malta. And she was telling this story as well in more detail. And apparently the levels of corruption go to the highest level of Maltese politics and business. Actually, I think we have somebody in Malta just now.
Oh, right.
Okay. Yeah, well, it was Lizzie, I beg your pardon. Lizzie, one of our correspondents, she's gone back to Malta.
Right.
And she will be actually reporting on this story for us at some point in the future as it unfolds. Now, Miss Galizia was killed when a rental car exploded near her home in the village of Badinaha, I think you pronounce that, in October 2017. The killing drew international condemnation and raised questions about the rule of law inside what is effectively an EU member state.
Yes.
So we have a huge corruption scandal in an EU state, which has a population smaller than Iceland's, I understand. I think it's only about 500,000 people who live there.
Isn't there a lot of corruption in Spain as well?
I believe there may well
Spanish
be,
government.
but apparently in Malta it is endemic in every level, including farming, land ownership, the tourist board, the tourist trade. Everything is apparently been infected with it. So it's understood that he claimed to police that Schembri approached him about the Caruana Galizia murder in November 2016. The approach supposedly came shortly after she had published a blog revealing that Schembri was being treated for cancer. Earlier this week, a doctor who knew both of these men was questioned by police on suspicion that he had agreed to pass notes between them. So there's another man implicated here as a go-between. The doctor, a man called Adrian Vela, was arrested on Wednesday, and it's believed he may have passed 2 typed, unsigned notes to Fenech on behalf of Schembri, and Fenech is alleged to have claimed that he was handed one of the notes after his arrest while he was under observation. So it's a very, very complicated plot.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we'll move along from that, and now we're going to talk about climate change, something else which I know affects many people in rural Scotland.
Indeed.
And everybody in the world, in fact. But I guess farmers tend to watch the weather more than most of us. Anyway, the European Parliament has declared a global climate and environmental emergency as it urged all EU countries to commit to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Now, it's intended to demonstrate Europe's green credentials days before a crucial UN climate conference in Madrid. So the vote also ratchets up pressure on Ursula von der Leyen, who is the incoming president of the European Commission, who declared this week that the EU would lead the fight against the existential threat of climate crisis. So it seems that the temperature, if you'll pardon the deliberate expression, has been turned up on this greenhouse story.
Yes. Funnily
politically.
enough, I actually watched her delivery seeking
Van der Leyen
for, telling, she laid out what her proposals were, what her team's policies were, and she introduced each one of her team to the European Parliament.
So she has.
She's
pretty much got it getting it organised.
Now, I wasn't able, because we were doing something with sheep, I wasn't able to finish watching the whole thing, so I don't know whether the thing was passed or not. The reason I was watching it was because it was going to be Alan Smith, our MEP, who's now no longer our MEP, but he hopefully might become my MP in Stirling.
Alan Smith, yeah.
But it was going to be his last speech. And it was very short. They were about 15 minutes behind time, so he didn't have time to do as much as Alan usually does. But he was backing her proposals. Some of the MEPs weren't backing her proposals because they didn't feel they were going far enough.
Well, this is what I was just going to come to. That in a separate vote on Thursday, MEPs backed a resolution stating that current EU climate targets were not in line with the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement, which calls for keeping global heating below 2 Celsius above pre-industrial levels, but aiming to cap the temperature rise at 1.5 Celsius. The MPs backed a tougher target of cutting greenhouse gas emissions by 55% by 2030, an improvement on the current 40% target, but still derided by Green politicians and campaigners as inadequate. The amount of work that must be needed to bring this under control is enormous because it affects everything.
Yes.
It affects farming and food production, it affects transportation, infrastructure, heating, lighting. Everything that Northern Europeans really depend upon is going to have to be cut very hard in order to meet these emission standards. Is it possible?
Yeah.
To make it before 2050 seems a long way away.
Yeah,
but
there's two aspects to it, because it only takes... Was there not a fire recently up on the moors somewhere?
There was in Yorkshire, I think.
In Yorkshire, and that...
Winter Hill.
That
I remember it.
Put out so many emissions and wiped out so many of the efforts that we'd already just put in. So you've got one fire in Yorkshire.
The North Yorkshire, because it destroyed a lot of peat as well.
Yes, and hasn't that volcano just erupted again?
Which one?
Down, away down in some South Pacific island.
Could be. That'll spew out a great deal of
Yes.
sulfur dioxide and all sorts of
So you've
other
got the
things.
volcanoes
CO2.
doing that. You've got the forest fires in Florida,
And there's huge fires in India
huge
with the
fires
stubble burning.
all over, and in the Amazon, and all these are still contributing massive amounts. And it's very hard to persuade our own Western public that what they do is going to have an impact. But we must persuade them, because we
I
can
agree.
make a difference.
One of the things that always irritates me about politicians when there's an emergency, and this next sentence will explain what I mean, is MEPs from the European Parliament's largest group, the centre-right European People's Party, now this is the equivalent of the Tories, are split over the climate emergency language. Not the climate emergency itself, but the way it's described.
Yeah.
The group had wanted to declare a climate urgency.
Oh, gosh.
I mean, it's like, you know, you're wanting to invent the wheel and you're trying to figure out what colour it should be.
Yes.
You know, it's that level of stupidity, isn't it?
It is.
Anyway, I think we shall move on since... Well, I'm just being... I just to mention that one of the biggest problem that we have, of course, for all pollution of the air is the combustion engine.
Yes.
It's as simple as that. And,
Yep.
and the diesel, the petrol engine, and it's just burning petroleum spirits, burning oil.
Yes.
I've been a great proponent for many years of hydrogen as a fuel.
Yes, yes.
And in fact, I've been mentioning this to anybody who will listen, that petrol engines can run on neat hydrogen.
Yeah.
And then there's the idea of new types of public transport.
Yes.
The Germans are
That can
particularly
make
good at this.
such a difference. And you could have photovoltaic panels over canals,
Yeah,
over bus stands,
everywhere.
on pavements, everywhere, that can create electricity, and then your lamps over the streets.
Would you prefer to have personal transportation like a car, or would you prefer better public transport?
I prefer better public transport,
Yeah.
but I understand that it isn't as economic in a rural area because of terms of distance. But within an urban area, better public transport would make a
Fewer
big
vehicles
difference.
with more people in them
Yes.
is always more
Yes.
efficient, I
Yes.
suppose. But, you know, green vehicles of any kind would basically sort the problem out. I mean, the more
Absolutely.
thing that you'll see a lot of new electrically driven bicycles on the streets at the moment. These are the latest thing.
Yes.
And the British government, like many other, have not caught up with legislation for such things yet.
Yeah.
They're still trying to figure out how to classify them.
We're just so backward.
Anyway, I think we shall leave the climate emergency or crisis or
And you
whatever
do
the
realise
Europeans
that
want to call it.
farmers, far from being that we are portrayed as the contributors, we are actually the answer to solving a lot of the problems.
What sort of problems can the farmers deal with?
Well, for instance, slurry spreading. If you've got the right equipment, then you're not putting all the methane and that sort of stuff into the air.
I once heard
Technology will solve it.
I once heard a cattleman tell me that people shouldn't need to spread muck if they put the cattle out to feed on grass. He said because they spread their own muck and it's much more healthy.
And this is another thing that we're all doing, even in the wet West.
Yep.
But only
We're putting the cattle in
about
sheds and feeding them cattle cake instead of
But we
letting them
have
graze.
to do that for 6 months of the year because of the wet.
Yeah.
But when it's not wet, it's just amazing to watch how you mob graze them on a small area, and then you take them off when the grass is just a certain height, move them to another area,
And they'll graze that down
and
and the other side
they've
grows again.
pooed and done all the things on there, and by the time you come back to that in so many weeks' time, it's back up to being grazed, needing grazed again. So you
self-sustaining.
keep moving them, and it really is working.
You spread them up by using the animals
Use
themselves.
the animals,
So it
yeah.
seems a
It's
far
called mob
more
grazing.
sensible way to do it.
Yes.
Anyway, completely unconnected subject, eh?
I'm always getting you back onto the farm.
No, it's all right. I like listening to your take on things. Anyway, this story might also get you going because this is the story of the last remaining single-sex state school in Scotland. Will admit boys for the first time in more than a century after a long-running battle that has split parents, pupils, and local residents. I'm talking here about the girls of Notre Dame High School in Glasgow. City councillors voted unanimously on Thursday morning in favour of Notre Dame High School becoming co-educational in 2021, concluding a row that prompted the formation of two opposing campaign groups. I mean, this was a pitched battle: Girls for Notre Dame and Notre Dame High for All, as well as a wider debate about contemporary value of single-sex education. Do you have an opinion on this, Day, about single-sex education? Were you educated in a mixed school?
No.
You were?
Any school I went to was just for girls.
And what do you
Apart
think?
from my primary school, WT Primary School, well, it was WT High School, but the primary end was mixed. And it was horrendous. Not because it was boys and girls in our class, but because the primary was there as part of the secondary. And every playtime that we went out, I would get knocked down by the big boys.
So they really need to segregate the larger kids from the smaller ones.
Yes, but so wasn't about sex.
It was about size.
It should be about size. But no, so I've got no experience. I don't know that I'd have got on with my work.
Do you think you would have been too distracted, Day? Seriously?
I think so, yes.
Well, I have a school-age son at the moment, and he's in a co-educational school, and he's thriving, and he's about to go to university. So I don't know if this is true or not, but I think ending single-sex schools is an equality act, in my opinion, anyway. It should always be that way.
Yes.
Why should we treat children differently because of sex, or because of colour or religion or anything else?
Yes, I mean, any school I taught in, as a teacher, was always a co-ed, two sexes in it, and I didn't find it. Well,
how else do children learn about each other unless they mix? That's the other thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
If they don't meet the opposite gender, they don't get a handle on understanding them or knowing what they're like, what the differences are and the similarities. Anyway, Maureen McKenna, who is the Executive Director for Education at Glasgow City Council, she has said, now that the decision has been made by elected members, education officers will start to develop transition plans and will engage with the school and the parents' representatives from all the associated primary schools and secondary schools that will be affected, because all of these will, I guess, feed in. Ms McKenna said the council was sensitive to the significant change for the school and the community. A spokesperson for Notre Dame High, Notre Dame High for All, this is the group which was wanting to change this status, and thanked all the councillors for deciding to allow girls and boys to go to their local school with their friends, their sisters and their brothers. I think that maybe just sums it up.
Yes.
They can go together. They're not going to be going separate ways.
That's right.
Anyway, okay, let's move on. And we're looking at now a public inquiry chair, which has been announced into issues at the Queen Elizabeth University's Hospital and the Royal Hospital, I think it's the Royal Hospital for Children and Young People, it's now
Edinburgh.
called. Now, the Right Honourable Lord Brodie will chair a public inquiry into issues at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital campus in Glasgow and the Royal Hospital for Children and Young People in Edinburgh. Now, we know that both of these buildings seem to have been plagued by post-opening problems, problems that are snags that have appeared after the buildings have been opened. The inquiry, which was announced by Jean Freeman, the Health Secretary, who I'm sure you know has been under intense pressure in the media over the last few weeks, she is the one who has announced this today and has said she will examine how serious problems relating to the key building systems and infrastructure occurred, what steps can be taken to prevent these in future projects. The Health Secretary intends to meet with Lord Brodie before the end of the year to discuss the terms of reference and the timescale. So they're preparing for an inquiry. They're not launching it yet, but they've announced it. So what is your feeling on this, Day?
Well, I think...
Is there a big problem in the building of hospitals?
Yeah, it's not just hospitals. Look at the PFI schools.
The collapsing walls and so on.
Yes, and when I was chairman of my local village community futures group, we got funding from the European Union and Scottish Government to extend and improve our facilities in the village hall. Yeah. To about 1.4 million. And the project manager did a wonderful job of getting this going. But the snagging that was involved afterwards, and some of the cheap finishes and the
So do you think they were cutting corners to meet the deadline?
No, there wasn't.
It was just really badly built.
It was badly built, and no matter how hard he tried, and the other team who were overseeing it, the project managers, somehow these builders got away with putting in cheap stuff, and there were leaks, and there was this, and there was that. I don't believe that there's anything that is funded from public money these building companies see as an easy option.
Well, it seems a cash cow.
It's a cash cow.
I know from experience of talking about this in other forums, particularly about the private finance initiative that you were talking about, the PFI, that the schools that were built using that technique, where we had private finance coming from groups of investors who would pay for the school to be built and then lease it back to the authority over 25 years at a very high rent usually, that those schools were built without the oversight of either a clerk of works or a building inspector who is not associated with the company which is building. So they were self-certifying their own buildings. They were saying, oh yes, we built it perfectly, and then we find several years down the line walls collapsing.
Or maybe not even years down the line.
But the PFI programme was started by the Labour government and continued and expanded by the Tories.
Yes.
And although it has built hundreds of schools, not many of them really met the standards that they should have.
No.
But the hospitals now, we seem to have the same problem. Infecting hospitals.
Yes.
I use the word infecting, obviously, because it's a hospital. But to me, it seems like this lack of oversight is the main problem. Why were the drainage issues at what used to be the Southern General, why were they not addressed properly? That actual site, I happen to know from a number of people I know who worked on that site, there are always drainage problems on that site.
Right.
It sits in a bit of silt in a bend in the river. And for the fact that they knew that they had those problems to begin with when they built the new hospital, and yet they still got them. And this business of the infections possibly being acquired by contamination by pigeons is all to do with the design of the buildings and the way that they've been put together. So unless you've got the detailed technical specifications of the building, you can't really comment on it. But I will quote what is being said by the SNP. The safety of patients and their families will always be my top priority. They must have the right to support. They must have the right support, I beg your pardon, and information to give them confidence that they're receiving the best care possible from our health service. This inquiry and its recommendations will help us learn lessons from recent issues so they're not repeated. So this is a remedy, I guess, for what's gone wrong with the hospitals.
Yes.
But it seems a bit like shutting the door after the horse is gone.
Yes, but it's all very well saying that, but have we ever had a public building built? I mean, look at that one the school down in Dumfriesshire as well.
There was one in your territory as well, up in Stirlingshire, but Balfron High, which had collapsing walls as well, didn't it?
Yeah, that's my school that I used to teach in.
I remember it because it was the gymnasium hall that collapsed because it was actually moving and kids were kicking it. I couldn't believe that when I heard that story, but apparently it is true.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to move us on to our second but one story. This is the story about Edinburgh Castle, which has apparently won the best heritage attraction at the prestigious British Travel Awards for a staggering 5th time.
Gosh. So
Edinburgh Castle seems to be right up there as one of the top attractions to visit in the UK.
Right.
The award is decided by members of the public. That's always a good way to measure real opinion. And was announced at the BTA Gala Awards dinner last night in London. Last year, over 2 million people visited Edinburgh Castle, making it Scotland's #1 paid-for visitor attraction. Now, when they say paid for, I imagine that means you pay to get in, am I right? Do you still pay to get into Edinburgh Castle?
Oh, I would think so.
I know our museums and art galleries are free. But many of our castles we have to pay for, do we not?
Yeah. You have to pay to get into Stirling, as far as you certainly pay for the car park.
Stirling Castle has always probably been my favourite castle
It's
as well.
lovely,
One of
isn't
them,
it?
far beyond anything Edinburgh has
Yes.
got. I love the Stirling Castle.
Absolutely. When you stand on the ramparts
The
at
view is
Stirling and you
incredible.
look out over the Carse, and that panorama for a farmer,
To see all that.
to see the different stratas of farming, from
Yeah.
your hill farms down to your lowland farms, down to your Karstland.
Yeah,
that
down
grows
into the
grain.
water meadows.
Yes,
I'm
yes.
trying to imagine hundreds of thousands of English cavalry heaving over the
Yeah,
horizon
yeah,
towards
that's
the
right.
castle as well.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, it appears that sort of enthusiasm that we share for castles is shared by a great number of
people.
UK
Yeah,
enthusiasts.
And it's so nice that Stirling Castle has been, for many years now, they've invested in it, and they've, Hysterical Scotland, as I call them, they've turned a corner since the SNP came into power, and they're a much more usable.
You think they're more accountable now?
They're more accountable, and they linked up with Glasgow School of Art.
That's right.
So you got a different attitude coming out of them. But what they've done with the castle is welcomed people into it. So it's no longer just for soldiers.
And this is, Edinburgh Castle, I'm just going to quote a little bit from the castle's executive manager, a man called Nick Finnegan. And he said, "We're incredibly proud to win this prestigious award for the 5th time, and we're grateful to all our visitors who voted. Their support is a huge vote of confidence in our hard-working and professional staff at Edinburgh Castle. The recognition comes after another year of record-breaking visitor numbers. All who came to the castle enjoy its fascinating history and its unbeatable views of the city." Which is true. I mean, I've been to Edinburgh Castle, I don't know how many times, and it is quite spectacular.
Yes.
Of all the cities actually in the UK, it's a capital city that has a castle sticking out the middle of it. You can't get any better than that with a capital city, really. Anyway, the British Travel Awards are considered to be the benchmark for excellence when it comes to finding the best place in the travel industry. And the Travel Awards is an independent organisation verified by leading global business practitioners, Deloitte.
Wow.
So it's nothing to do with the government.
No.
Okay, our final story tonight, we're rattling through them, finally get to this one.
Good, yep.
Okay, so this is a story about how Scottish Parliament is planning to mark St Andrew's Day.
All right.
A day which you would think should be the national day, really, for Scotland, but doesn't seem to get the recognition we would hope. Anyway, the SNP's MSP Tom Arthur will today lead a parliamentary debate marking St Andrew's Day. The annual celebration held on November the 30th commemorates the life of St Andrew, Scotland's patron saint. Festivals are held throughout Scotland, and the occasion is marked internationally by St Andrew's Day societies across the world. And I know myself, having travelled a lot when I was younger, that almost everywhere you go, even in the Far East, there will be a St Andrew's society or a Burns Club. Or both,
yeah,
sometimes.
Burns, I can imagine.
But the MSPA will also highlight Fair Saturday, a global cultural movement which aims to promote community empowerment and charitable giving. So,
I like the sound of that.
Yeah, it sounds good. Mr. Arthur said, St Andrew's Day has expanded beyond a religious observance. It's truly a celebration of what it means to be Scottish. It can mean many things, he said, but to me, I think anyone who visits Scotland is struck by the compassion of the people and the kindness that is woven into the fabric of our society's makeup. This is a country which values helping others when they're in need, even when we may be down on our luck. I think that really sums us up quite nicely. And I think I'd like to end the show tonight just with the last part of what he says. He says here, it's a collaborative spirit that St Andrew's Day is so fittingly coincides with Fair Saturday. I would encourage all my fellow Scots to attend a Fair Saturday event. There is one, I believe, actually in Glasgow coming up this weekend. Engage with your local community and reach out to those who may need help. A bit of kindness can never be underestimated, and that's the message that I want to convey this St Andrew's Day.
Very good.
I think that ties the show up rather neatly. Day, I think that ends us on a nice, optimistic note.
Yes.
So, Day, it just remains for me to thank you again for joining me again in the studio. I always find your point of view interesting, because you hold a point of view that nobody else could have. Anyway, thank you all for watching the programme this evening. Sorry we're a little bit late. We We are also still looking for your donations at the moment. We're on a drive at the moment to increase the donations to Broadcasting Scotland to help pay our bills. And we have a target set of £20,000 to reach in our crowdfunder. So please, if you enjoy our programmes, you want to see more of us, and you want us to make more programmes and to be able to survive as a studio, please contact us using the instructions on your screen now if you want to become a supporter of Broadcasting Scotland. It costs just £5 a month, and you can donate more than that if you wish. Okay, it's completely open. Be as generous as you can afford to be. But we certainly need big money at the moment. We're on the brink of really launching the channel, and we need your help as our supporters to get it done. So dig deep and follow the instructions on your screen. That's about it from me on this Thursday night's edition of Scotland at 7. I hope you'll join me again next Monday. In the meantime, have a great weekend, and thank you again to Day Tucker for being my guest this evening. Good night, everyone.